The Sherpa's Podcast Picks is presented in cooperation with Thresher PR, which is headed by Stephen Joyner. We now take you to the Sherpa Chalet, where Jim the Podcast Sherpa will be interviewing podcasters near and far. Personally, if you've ever stood next to the Sherpa, you'd hope it will be far. That new yak-scented shampoo isn't getting him any new friends.
This week, it's a mini episode of The Sherpa's Podcast Picks, featuring 20 Sherpa samples from the charts in Podcastia. By the way, I bet you didn't know that the Sherpa once had a job in a calendar factory, but it didn't last long. He got fired for taking a day off.
Welcome to the Sherpa's Podcast Picks. It's the podcast about, podcasts. And now, coming to you from Mount Podcastia, here's your host, who wonders what's on your podcast playlist, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, Rebels of the Sherpalution, and welcome to another episode of the Sherpa's Podcast Picks. My name, you know my name. Look up the number, you know my name. Oh, sorry, having a little Beatles moment there. My name is Jim the Podcast Sherpa, coming to you from Sherpa-Lu Studios here in the Sherpa Chalet, high atop Mount Podcastia, where I overlook millions and millions of podcasts that are out there. We are having a little mini episode today, so you don't have to be too tired of my voice. So I just wanted to say hello and welcome to season 14. We kicked it off last week with True Crime Screening Room, which essentially used to be the Sherpa Screening Room, but we had so many great true crime episodes, I figured let's put a title on it so everybody knows when it's true crime time. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode, as did I. And this week we are just doing some Sherpa samples, and then I will leave you to be on your merry way. Do you have a merry way? I don't know. I know some people who live on merry way. My mail to them always gets sent back. I don't know why. Refused. I don't know what that means. Okay, so we're here. Why not jump right into Sherpa samples?
Now it's time for Sherpa Samples. Got a podcast for the Sherpa to sample? Let us know and we'll mention your name on the show.
It is, of course, time for Sherpa Samples, and that's where I talk about some of the podcasts that I've been checking out that are on the podcast chart that maybe you might want to add to your podcast playlist. So I've got 21 for you this episode, so let's jump in on it right away. IMO, that's Michelle Obama and her brother Craig Robinson. And they really talk about a lot of different things. It's not really that political. They really talk about their lives. They've led interesting lives, really, especially up to the points that they've had so far in their life. I was really fascinated by the way they talked about their parents' style of raising them. And it was really fascinating. You don't really hear stories like that nowadays, and very refreshing, really fascinating. I enjoyed this podcast a lot. The Gentleman from Hell. Nope, no jokes, please. This is a serialized fiction podcast about a town, an entire town that mysteriously disappears, and the investigators who go on a mission to obviously try and find out what exactly happened. In the true crime department, we have the podcast 3, and there are various stories that get featured in this podcast, and the most recent one is about a young woman who was hit by a car and then sexually assaulted in Hawaii, and the person that gets arrested that may or may not have committed the crime. We also have Happy Face, which is about the daughter of the Happy Face killer, whose name was Keith Jesperson. And if this sounds a little bit familiar, there is actually a TV show out called Happy Face. I believe it's on Paramount Plus if you want to catch it on the streaming. Not 100% sure about that. And Dennis Quaid actually plays the Happy Face killer on this show. Don't Cross Cat. This was another unique one. It's about a woman who ends up following this life coach on social media and kind of gets involved in her life and all of the odd things that go on once she gets involved with her. Carrie Jade does not exist. I believe this was an issue that happened over in Ireland, if I'm not mistaken. It's about a woman whose name actually is not Carrie Jade, but she was a fraudster and she conned a lot of people and she assumed a lot of identities and scammed people out of a lot of money. And it really follows through on all of her crimes and the court case that followed as well. No Gods, No Mayors. This sounds unusual, but it's actually about some of the worst mayors in history, and most of them are in the United States. Some of them actually got 2 parts. The episode that I listened to was about Mayor Tiffany Henyard, who I believe was in the Midwest. There were a lot of weird things going on there as well, and I think she was actually called the worst mayor in America. There's a dubious distinction to hold on to. Good Morning, Gustavo is hosted by the guys who normally host the Rooster Teeth podcast. And we've talked about some of their shows in previous Sherpa Samples. It's just a little side project that they were trying, and they go and talk to different people. I think they were trying out hamburgers that were shaped like a ravioli, but then they were talking about a lot of different topics throughout the course of the show. The Geekenders is hosted by a man and a woman, Jesse and Dodger, and they talk about all things geeky, mostly with a lot of video games and stuff like that. That seemed to occupy a large percentage of the conversation. But I got to say something. This is a minor complaint. I don't know if you should be on a podcast featuring geeky stuff when you're a girl and your name is Dodger. I think that's probably one of the coolest names that a woman can have. So good for you, Dodger. You're very cool. You're not too sorry. If that's insulting, I don't know. What exactly never mind. Okay, we will move on. We have more things to talk about. I heard a podcast called The Best Idea Yet. It is hosted by 2 guys named Nick and Jack, and they usually do, I think, business podcasts about certain companies. And this is the backstories of a lot of the items that people go crazy about, like Levi's 501 jeans, the game of Monopoly, how Sriracha got popular, and so on and so forth. There's really interesting stuff. There's really wild stuff. The episode about Monopoly was really fascinating. You guys should check that one out. And I also heard Good Hang with Amy Poehler. Amy Poehler was a writer and cast member of the TV show Saturday Night Live. And the episode that I caught with her was an interview with her buddy, Tina Fey. And before the interview, they show her talking with a few other of her friends, and some of them were on Saturday Night Live. And even that portion before the interview was really funny, especially with Rachel Dratch. Rachel Dratch did the Debbie Downer skits, for those of you who remember them, on Saturday Night Live. And she just had the rest of them just hysterical. And this was before she even started talking to Tina Fey. But Amy's a really good interviewer. She's done a couple of very different podcasts, but this was really enjoyable. Definitely another one that you might want to check out. There's a podcast called Pretty Funny, and it features a couple, Mario and Bryn. And I think that Mario is actually a stand-up comic. I don't know what Bryn does, but they've been dating for a little while, and they just talk about all different sorts of stuff. That's what they call the podcast, Pretty Funny. So if you think they're pretty funny, maybe you might want to check that one out as well. Another podcast that I enjoyed was something called Pluribus Motto, and this is hosted by John Hodgman. Yes, the one and only John Hodgman, who I always find fascinating. And you may remember he did a podcast called Judge John Hodgman, and I like that too. And his co-host is an actress named Janet Varney, and they talk about the different states in the United States, and they do all the little factoids that you might not know of, like the state motto, the state bird, the state song, and so on and so forth. The one that I listened to was about the state of Vermont, and I learned a little bit about the Green Mountain Boys as well. Look it up in your history books, folks. You'll see the story. That's a really fascinating story as well. Sergei and the Westminster spy ring. This was about a Russian-born man living in England who actually ended up getting involved in a spy ring that had ties to President Vladimir Putin, and a lot of espionage going on in that one, as you can clearly imagine. The House of Maher is 3 sisters. They're the Maher sisters. I know, what a surprise. And I know they come from different walks of life. One of them is an athlete, one of them is a social media person, and the other person is a civil rights advocate. And they really interview each other. And, you know, it's funny, sometimes when you get podcasts with siblings, you think that they're going to get kind of silly, but this was really nice. And, you know, really adult conversation. The ladies are very respectful of each other and respectful of their audience. And I like them. I never really heard of them. I don't know if they were on YouTube or anything like that. But yeah, if you want to hear some good discussion, House of Maher. And I checked out some podcasts from the BBC as well, called Jonathan Pye. I don't know if this is a TV show or not, but I know it was a podcast, and it's about a gentleman with very extreme opinions, whether you agree with them or not, who has a radio call-in show and about his life. And it's kind of like, a sitcom, but it's got a lot of political overtones. It's a very interesting premise, and they do a really good job of it. Got to find out if that's a TV show. If you guys know, shoot me a message at Sherpalution, and we will get this issue resolved. Factually with Adam Conover is an investigative podcast. I was wondering, I was looking at this guy's face on the cover art and listening to the name, and it sounded familiar, and I realized that Adam Conover was a guy who hosted a TV show a while back called Adam Ruins Everything. And that was actually an investigative TV show where he kind of goes into the weeds and the background of a lot of different things that go on in society. The episode that I listened to actually was a discussion with a gentleman on the firing of federal workers and, you know, what really happens with all that and what's going on behind that. I really appreciated the fact they really gave federal workers a lot of respect, which I think they always should do that. But I know lots of times people like to beat up on people who work for the government. This was really great and really fascinating. And I think for people who have like a different opinion on that, maybe, you know, have a listen to that episode and understand it a little bit better. I think the guest that he had on, I don't remember his name, really presented a fascinating viewpoint on it. And I don't think it was really that hard to argue with as far as the things that this guest was saying. There were two really funny British podcasts that I checked out. One of them was I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue. And the other one is called the Horne Section Podcast. And both of them are a lot of improv and funny music and comedy and really brilliant stuff. And I know sometimes I say about British humor, oh, it's very British. I didn't think these were actually very British. I think they were pretty universally funny on both accounts and very cleverly done. I enjoyed both of them. They were making me laugh, even though I was in a spot where I shouldn't be laughing out loud, but I wanted to laugh out loud. Okay, I just laughed silently to myself instead. And lastly, the Oprah Podcast. Didn't Oprah have like about 20 podcasts out already? But this one is called the Oprah Podcast, and I don't know if it was featured interviews from maybe her TV show or these were just separate interviews. And in this episode that I listened to, she is interviewing a lady named Melody Hobson, whom I found out is on the board of directors at Starbucks. So she knows a good thing or two about coffee. She wrote a book about how parents can explain financial literacy to their children. And the things that she was saying, again, really fascinating. I thought it was a really good interview. And also I found out, check this out, Melody Hobson is also married to George Lucas. Yes, I knew some of you Star Wars geeks knew that already, but I thought that was really cool. His name comes up once or twice in the interview, but there is no Star Wars talk. Just talk about how parents should explain money to their children. And seeing that I have 50 cents in my pocket, I will use that to buy a token that will take us into, yes, the outro.
Want to join the rebels of the Sherpalution? Follow us at Sherpalution on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky.
Thanks so much for spending a little time here at the Sherpa Chalet, listening to the Sherpa's podcast picks. We're here every Wednesday with new episodes usually, and we are available on podcast apps everywhere. And of course, the Sherpalution YouTube page. But that's not all that's going on. Not only do we do episodes on Wednesdays, on Saturdays, we've been replaying some of the Sherpa, that's me, the Sherpa's favorite episodes on Saturday, and we're calling them Sherpa Selects. So if you missed them the first time around, here's your chance to miss them the second time around. But I hope you do swing by and check out some of these episodes. They were the ones that I thought were really a lot of fun, and I want to put them on the YouTube channel. So I figured, what better way to present them? So it's the repeats from seasons 1 through 7. And that's not all, Rebels. If you tune in Monday, April 14th, 2025. That will be the debut of the Sherpa-Lu Studio's AI podcast, Fake People, Real Trivia. It's them handling actual trivia questions. And if you've got a trivia question that you'd like answered on the show, you know what you can do. Just message me on Sherpalution, wherever you may follow me, or even email me personally at jimthepodcastsherpa@gmail.com, and we will do our best to get your question answered, and hopefully it'll be a really good answer as well. So there's a lot to look forward to, and we hope to see you then. So until then, I say to you, Viva la Sherpalution!
Thanks for listening to the Sherpa's Podcast Picks. The podcast is now over. Please disperse and tell everyone about us. As long as they don't put us back in jail. Viva la Sherpalution!